The sun had just begun to set behind the quiet trees, when 7 best friends arrived at the edge of Luma Lake. Their tents were packed tight, their backpacks full of snacks, and their hearts full of excitement. As the sky turned shades of peach and purple, Alan, Carlos, John, Ben, Martha, Candice, and Olivia each picked a soft spot to pitch their tents. They didn't know it yet, but this night would be like no other. As the fireflies began to twinkle in the tall grass, Olivia sat quietly on a blanket, watching them dance in the evening breeze. Their tiny lights blinked in patterns, as if they were whispering secret lullabies only she could understand. Olivia smiled softly and hugged her knees, breathing in the cool, comforting air of the lake. Inside his tent, Alan flipped through an old, wrinkled book he had brought along. The cover read, "Legends of Luma Lake." He read aloud in a whisper, "When the moon is high and the lake is still, the lanterns will rise and light the path for those ready to grow." His eyes grew wide with wonder. Suddenly, from the still water of the lake, a soft golden glow began to rise. One by one, round lanterns floated gently into the air, as if the stars themselves were coming down to say hello. The children peeked out from their tents, eyes sparkling with amazement. Candice stepped out onto the soft grass and whispered, "Let's follow them." Her voice was filled with quiet excitement. The others looked at one another, unsure but curious. The lanterns floated slowly into the nearby woods, glowing brighter, as if waiting. The friends gathered at the edge of the trees. "Let's go together," said Martha gently. And so, hand in hand, they followed the floating lights beneath the rustling leaves, each step slower than the last, full of wonder and care. Carlos, always the brave one, walked a little ahead, his eyes full of determination. He turned and grinned, "Don't worry, I've got this." He pointed toward the brightest lantern, guiding them through the tall trees like a captain of a ship under stars. John stopped near a patch of moss and gently knelt down. There, resting quietly, was a tiny, tired caterpillar. He scooped it up with both hands and smiled. "Even the smallest ones need care too," he said kindly, and the others nodded in quiet agreement. The little caterpillar curled into a fuzzy ball in John's palm. The kids gathered close, their faces lit by the nearby lanterns. "Kindness," whispered Martha, "is something even the tiniest creatures can feel." They waited patiently as John helped the caterpillar back to a safe leaf. Ben, with his usual energy, spun in a little circle and said, "If we keep stopping for bugs, we'll never reach the moon." Everyone laughed, just the gentle kind of laugh that tickles your chest. And in that laughter, their nervousness faded, and their feet felt lighter. Martha paused beside a glowing flower that shimmered with blue light. It looked like moonlight had been caught inside its petals. She knelt down, touched it gently, and whispered, "So much beauty in silence." The others stood quietly, letting the calm wrap around them. As the trail bent deeper into the woods, Alan slowed down. Ahead was a path darker than the rest, and he stopped at its edge. "I'm not sure we should go that way," he said, eyes wide. The forest ahead seemed to hold a quiet that made even the wind pause. Candice came up beside him and gently took his hand. "It's okay," she said softly. "We don't have to be brave alone." Alan looked at her, then at the others, and slowly nodded. And so, together, they stepped into the deeper part of the forest. The darkness wasn't scary for long. The lanterns above began to glow just a little brighter. Their warm light touched the leaves and the path ahead, painting everything gold. The children's steps were small but steady. Above them, the lanterns formed a gentle line, swaying left and right like lullabies in the wind. The group walked in a quiet rhythm, feeling the peaceful magic of the forest. It was as if the lanterns were leading them, not just forward but inward too. They soon reached a small stream, bubbling softly like a whispering brook. The lanterns floated just above the water, making the ripples glow. One by one, they took off their shoes, dipped their toes into the cool stream, and crossed slowly, giggling at the ticklish water. As they walked on, Olivia began to hum. It was a soft melody, gentle and low, like the sound of a lullaby remembered from long ago. The tune floated through the trees, mixing with the rustle of leaves and the whisper of lanterns above. Suddenly, one glowing lantern drifted down from the others. It floated gently toward Ben and hovered right above his hands. He stood still, eyes wide, as it glowed a little brighter, like it was choosing him. Inside the lantern, a picture began to appear. It was Ben, laughing and pulling Alan up from the ground after a fall. Ben blinked in surprise. "That was last week," he whispered. The lantern gently shimmered, as if nodding. Ben smiled, a soft one this time. "Guess the lanterns really do know us," he said. The group gathered close again, their hearts a little fuller than before. And with glowing lights above and warm feelings inside, they walked on. The trees around them began to grow taller and wider, their trunks twisting gently like old dancers in the wind. The air smelled of moss and warm earth, and the lanterns floated just above their heads, now like guardians lighting the way. "No," one spoke. They didn't need to. The forest was speaking in whispers they could feel in their hearts. Carlos paused beside one of the tallest trees. There, on the bark, glowing faintly, were carved symbols, strange and beautiful. He traced them with his fingers and slowly read aloud, "To grow. Be still sometimes." The message shimmered like moonlight on water, then faded. The children sat down beneath the tall tree, letting the quiet sink in. The lanterns above dimmed ever so slightly, as if giving the forest room to speak. No one moved. They listened to the rustle of leaves, the gentle sway of branches, the peace inside themselves. A soft breeze stirred the air, and from the other side of the meadow, something small floated toward Olivia. It was a paper boat, folded carefully, glowing softly with golden light. It spun in the air like a feather, then landed silently at her feet. Olivia knelt down and picked up the paper boat. Inside, she found something surprising. A tiny drawing. It was her own drawing of a moonlit tree, just like the one they were sitting under. Her eyes sparkled. "The forest knows us," she whispered, holding the boat gently to her heart. Just then, Martha noticed a lantern floating near her face. She looked into it and saw her own reflection. Only in the reflection, she was quietly crying and smiling at the same time. Her eyes widened. "I didn't know I was still holding so much," she whispered softly. Martha wiped a tear from her cheek and whispered, "Feelings are part of strength, too." She smiled gently as her friends gathered around her, no one saying a word, just offering their quiet presence. Their warmth wrapped around her like a soft blanket. Without needing to be asked, the group leaned in and gave Martha a big, warm hug. No rush, no noise, just the stillness of kindness. In that moment, the lanterns around them glowed even brighter, almost as if they were proud. As they continued walking, Candice noticed a lantern floating lower than the others. This one was different. and its side were gentle symbols glowing in spirals. She leaned closer, tilting her head, and whispered, "I think it's a puzzle." Candice carefully followed the glowing lines with her fingers. The symbols shifted slightly, forming a message. Not all answers come from thinking, some come from feeling. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, letting the words settle in her heart like soft sand. The path curved again, and a soft mist began to settle over the ground. It wasn't cold or scary, just quiet, like a cozy fog you'd find in a dream. But the trail ahead disappeared into it, and the lanterns began to flicker. Alan looked ahead and swallowed nervously. He had been doing so well, but fog always made him uneasy. This time though, he stepped forward. "Let me try to guide us," he said, surprising even himself. Alan closed his eyes for a moment and listened, not just to the sounds, but to the feeling of the path beneath his feet, the rhythm of his breath, and the faint glow of the lanterns above. Then, slowly, he took the first step into the fog. One by one, the others followed him. They didn't speak, they just trusted him. In that still fog, their hearts stayed close. And step by step, the soft sound of their footsteps made a path all its own. Eventually, the fog began to lift. And when it did, the group found themselves standing beside a sparkling crystal pond. The surface shimmered like a mirror made of starlight, completely still, completely magical. They gathered around the edge of the pond, and one by one, leaned in to see their reflections. But instead of their usual faces, the water showed something different. Each reflection told a story of something kind, or brave, or beautiful inside them. Carlos gasped softly. His reflection showed him helping Ben across a fallen log, not now, but in the future. A gentle smile spread across his face. "I didn't know I could be that kind of strong," he whispered. John looked down and saw himself standing between two arguing kids. In the water, he was calm, listening, helping them talk. He touched his chest softly. "I want to be someone who helps," he said. Martha's reflection showed her in a bright classroom, reading a glowing storybook aloud while children listened, wide-eyed and smiling. She blinked. "Maybe I'll be a teacher one day," she whispered. The lanterns above twinkled in agreement. Olivia's reflection was not of doing, but of being. She was sitting beneath a tree, humming softly as animals napped around her. She smiled, peaceful and still. "Sometimes, I think my quiet is my gift," she said. Ben leaned close to the crystal pond again. This time, his reflection showed him sitting next to a friend, who looked sadder them, a cookie and a smile. He giggled. "Even small things matter," he whispered. The lanterns above flickered, like they agreed with a chuckle. The children sat by the pond for a while, quietly watching the still water shimmer and the lanterns hover above them. No one rushed. It was a moment meant to stretch like a hug that stays just a little longer than needed, and somehow feels just right. Candice stood up and said softly, "I think the lanterns are ready for us to go on." And indeed, the glowing orbs had begun to drift toward a winding path filled with gentle purple flowers that swayed even though there was no breeze. As they walked between the flowers, Olivia looked up and whispered, "They look like sleepy stars." The petals shimmered faintly, and the kids walked slowly, almost as if not to wake them. The whole path felt like a soft lullaby under their feet. Suddenly, the lanterns stopped above a quiet hill. At the top, a single tree stood alone, its trunk glowing faintly, and its wide branches reaching toward the sky like open arms. It looked welcoming, ancient, and wise. The friends climbed the hill in silence, one foot after another. When they reached the top, the lanterns floated around the tree, encircling it gently. A golden glow spread outward, touching the children's faces with warmth. As they stood beneath the tree, a soft voice, not a sound, but more a feeling, murmured through their hearts. "Thank you for listening. Thank you for feeling. You are growing." The children didn't speak, but their hearts swelled with quiet understanding. From the center of the tree, a pulse of golden light rose up, lifting into the sky like a silent firework. It drifted higher and higher until it touched the stars, and then the stars began to glow a little brighter, like they'd been waiting. Alan whispered, "It's like we planted something without planting it." Candice nodded. "Maybe the tree was always there, and we just finally saw it." The others looked at each other, thoughtful and calm. As the stars twinkled above, a final lantern floated down to them. Inside it, a tiny scroll gently unfurled. On it were the words, "You are light. Carry it home." Olivia smiled and reached out, gently touching the lantern with one finger. The lanterns began to float back toward the path they came from, gently guiding the way home. The children followed, walking slowly, their hearts full of glowing peace and wonder. The forest now felt like an old friend walking beside them. Back across the little stream, through the quiet mist, past the carved trees and the glowing flowers, they retraced their steps. But it all looked different now. Not because the forest changed, but because they had. As they reached the edge of the trees, the moon shone full and bright over Luma Lake. The water was still again. The lanterns floated slowly back toward the lake's surface and began to disappear one by one into the water. Ben let out a soft sigh. "I don't want it to end." Martha smiled gently. "But now it's part of us. It doesn't have to end if we remember." The others nodded, each carrying a silent promise in their hearts. They returned to their tents and sleeping bags, their voices low and sleepy. The night felt warmer, and even the stars above seemed to twinkle more kindly. One by one, they crawled into their tents, their eyes heavy, their hearts light. Carlos looked up through the tent flap at the stars and whispered, "Thank you, lanterns." Then he closed his eyes and let the memory settle in, like a feather falling gently into place. Inside another tent, Olivia hummed the soft melody she had made up in the forest. It floated into the night like a lullaby. The trees swayed gently, and the fireflies outside blinked in time with her tune. John lay awake for just a moment longer, remembering the little caterpillar from earlier. "I hope it's okay," he murmured with a smile. Then, like a leaf on a pond, he drifted quietly into sleep. As all the children slept soundly, the forest wrapped itself in stillness. The tree on the hill glowed faintly in the distance, and beneath the waters of Luma Lake, the lanterns rested, waiting for the next night, the next journey. And somewhere in the sky, a star blinked just a little brighter. For now, the children dreamed not of dragons or castles, but of kindness, courage, and light. And with that, the forest whispered one last time, "Good night."